If I told you the most haunted object on Earth has been tested by physicists, chemists and psychologists and still no one can explain it, would you believe me? The Dybbuk Box isn't just a ghost story. It's a documented case file that's been examined under lab lights and still refuses to make sense. Every reading says it's an ordinary cabinet, yet everyone who touches it ends up terrified, sick, or worse. Even skeptics have walked away shaken. It shouldn't be possible. But here we are 2 decades later, still trying to explain why a simple wooden box makes people lose sleep. Maybe it's science. Maybe it's fear. Or maybe it's something we've never been able to measure. It all began in September 2001 in Portland, Oregon. Kevin Manis, an antique dealer with a small shop under the Burnside Bridge, walked into an estate sale that looked ordinary at first glance. Tables full of old lamps, furniture and glassware filled the room. Nothing unusual, until he saw a small wooden wine cabinet. Dark, old, hand-carved. It caught his attention immediately. The estate belonged to a woman who had just passed away at the age of 103. Her granddaughter was there that day. When Kevin picked up the box to buy it, she told him something he would never forget. She said her grandmother brought the cabinet with her when she escaped Poland during the war. She was a Holocaust survivor who had spent time hiding in Spain before coming to the United States. For as long as the family could remember, she kept that cabinet locked away. Then came the warning. "Never open it, it has a dibbuk inside," the granddaughter said. Kevin laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. Her eyes stayed fixed on the cabinet. When he offered to give it back, saying it must be a family heirloom, she shook her head and told him they didn't want it. He took it anyway. Back at his workshop, Kevin decided to open the box. Inside were strange little objects that didn't seem to belong together. 2 old wheat pennies from 1925 and 1928. 2 locks of hair, 1 light, 1 dark, each tied neatly with a string. A small dried rosebud, a golden cup that looked more like an egg holder than something to drink from, a black iron candlestick with tiny legs that curled like tentacles, and a stone tablet with the Hebrew word shalom carved into it. At first, Kevin saw nothing unusual about any of it. He thought it was just an old woman's keepsake box. He cleaned it up and planned to give it to his mother as a birthday gift. That's when things began to happen. A few days later, while Kevin was away running errands, his employee Jane contacted him in distress. She was crying and shouting over the phone, claiming that someone was in the basement destroying property. She reported hearing loud voices and the sound of glass breaking. Kevin rushed back. He found Jane sitting on the floor of his office, shaking and crying. When he tried to speak to her, she slapped him, grabbed her bag, and walked out. She didn't come back to work again. Kevin went down to the basement to see for himself. Every light bulb had been smashed, 9 in their sockets, and 10 fluorescent tubes scattered across the floor. The air smelled strange, a mix of jasmine and something sour, almost like cat urine. The iron door to the basement was locked, but no one had been inside. That was only the beginning. Kevin later reported unusual occurrences in the workshop. He described feeling cold air moving through the space and seeing tools fall without explanation. He also mentioned glimpsing dark figures in his peripheral vision. Around the same time, he began experiencing recurring nightmares involving an elderly woman with hollow eyes standing beside him and whispering words he could not understand. Even after taking the cabinet home, things didn't stop. The smell returned, sometimes faint, sometimes strong enough to wake him up. He would find lights turned on when he had turned them off. The smoke alarm went off for no reason. One night, around 4:30 in the morning, he woke up to the feeling of someone breathing on his neck. When he turned, he saw a large, dark shape moving down the hallway. Even after all these, he decided to go ahead with the gift. On October 31st, 2001, Kevin presented the cabinet to his mother as a birthday gift. According to accounts, as she opened the cabinet and lifted the lid, she immediately felt a cold wind coming from inside the box. Within minutes, Kevin heard a thud and rushed back into the room. His mother was sitting motionless in the chair, tears running down her face. She couldn't speak. Doctors at the hospital confirmed that Kevin's mother had suffered a stroke. She survived but couldn't speak for a while. When Kevin visited, she wrote short notes showing she wanted nothing to do with the cabinet. Later, when she could whisper again, she said it was evil. After that, Kevin stopped calling it a wine cabinet and began calling it the Dybbuk Box. When Kevin Mannis finally sold the box on eBay in June 2003, it was bought by a college student named Josef Nietzsche. He paid $140 for it. He thought it would be a fun story to tell his friends, nothing more. No one took it seriously. That changed a few weeks later. Josef began talking about small, strange things that started happening in the house he shared with 6 roommates. 2 of them complained of burning eyes. Another kept getting sick without a clear reason. Someone else said they always felt tired, like their energy was being drained. Soon, the whole house started to notice a sour smell, something between cat urine and juniper bushes. By early September, Josef wrote that he could barely sleep. He started to see tall, dark shapes in his side vision. They disappeared whenever he turned his head. He also mentioned that the lights kept burning out, that he was exhausted, and that his hair was thinning fast. After 8 months, he put the cabinet back on eBay. The next buyer was a man named Jason Haxton, the director of the Museum of Osteopathic Medicine at A.T. Still University, also in Kirksville. He bought it in February 2004 for $280. After the cabinet was brought into the museum office, the museum's computer systems began to malfunction. Files disappeared, and several weeks of digital work were lost. Haxton reported feeling a sudden sharp pain in his stomach when he handled the cabinet, describing the sensation as if the object had a pulse. In the following days, he developed severe physical symptoms, including red welts on his skin, coughing up blood, bleeding eyes, and difficulty breathing at night. Other museum staff members also reported feeling ill. That same strong odour, described as a mix of jasmine and decay, was detected in the building. Light bulbs frequently flickered and burned out, and several visitors reported feeling lightheaded when standing near the cabinet. Haxton eventually took the cabinet home to study it, but the activity followed him there. His house grew cold no matter how high he turned the thermostat. His son once shouted that a dark figure was standing behind him while he watched television. Haxton started keeping a journal. He wrote down every noise, every smell, every dream. The notes matched what Nietzsche had written months earlier, almost word for word. Out of fear and frustration, Haxton contacted Rabbi David Cohen in St. Louis. The rabbi advised him to trap the cabinet inside a box lined with gold, a material believed to block negative energy. Haxton followed the advice. He sealed it away and never opened it again. By the time Jason Haxton sealed the Dybbuk Box, the story had already taken on a life of its own. What started as a strange eBay listing became something bigger. People across the internet began posting, sharing, and retelling every version they could find. Blogs, message boards, and early video platforms were filled with arguments and updates. Some people even tried to make their own copies and sell them online. The story became part of a much larger online conversation, a kind of live ghost story built by thousands of people at once. Inside the museum in Missouri, where the real box had once been stored, staff members were still uneasy. They talked about the lights turning on and off, the strange smell, and how anyone who handled the cabinet too much got sick. Haxton himself continued to have health problems. He ran tests to see if mercury or mold might be the cause, but every result came back negative. Years later, the box was moved to a new home, this time in Las Vegas. Paranormal investigator Zach Bagans placed it inside his haunted museum, where it was given its own dark, glass-enclosed room. Here, visitors enter in small groups under low light, and security cameras watch from every angle. Still, every time someone stands near it, the same reports return. Nausea, dizziness, the feeling that something is watching, and every test that tries to find a reason finds nothing at all. But to really understand what people believe lives inside it, we have to look at the legend it's named after. After years of confusion about where the power of the Dybbuk Box might come from, many believers return to the oldest explanation. They say the box holds a dibbuk, a wandering spirit from Jewish mysticism. The word comes from the Hebrew dibbuk, which means to cling or to hold on. In stories passed down through generations, a dibbuk is the soul of someone who died with unfinished business or deep regret. Instead of moving on, it attaches itself to the living, searching for peace it cannot find on its own. The idea of the dibbuk appears again and again in Jewish writing, but its roots go back hundreds of years. By the 1500s, during the time of the great Kabbalist Isaac Luria, scholars began describing how these troubled spirits might be faced or freed. Luria and his followers wrote about a belief called Gilgul, which is the cycle of the soul returning to earth. Some souls, they said, became so heavy with sin that they could not return, and instead they clung to the world as lost spirits. These teachings were more than stories, they became instructions. In the writings of that era, there were steps for dealing with such spirits. Learned rabbis or holy men called Ba'alei Shem were asked to lead the exorcisms. The rituals were careful and sacred. They were usually done inside a synagogue, not in secret, but before witnesses, often 10 men gathered in prayer. The ceremony included removing 7 Torah scrolls, blowing 7 ram's horns, and commanding the spirit to leave while reciting the Ana Bekoch, a long protective prayer written from 42 holy letters. The purpose was not punishment but peace. These rituals were meant to guide the restless soul toward its proper place. For centuries, most stories describe dibbuks possessing people, never objects. But some scholars believe that, in rare cases, sacred vessels were used to hold what could not be expelled. The Dybbuk box, they say, might be one of those vessels. When Jason Hacks owned the box, he treated it less like a curiosity and more like a relic. The rabbi he consulted suggested building a container made of acacia wood lined with gold leaf, a method drawn from the ancient construction of the Ark of the Covenant. Inside the box were objects that also reflected old Jewish customs. There was a small stone marked with the Hebrew word shalom, meaning peace, and on the back of the cabinet was the Shema, the central prayer of Judaism, carved into the wood. To believers, none of these details was random. They saw in them a system of faith and protection, not superstition. According to the Kabbalah scholars who studied it, the carvings and craftsmanship align with methods once used to trap or contain an unclean spirit. To them, the Dybbuk box is not a horror story, but a piece of spiritual history. It follows a path of tradition that seeks not to frighten but to restore balance between the living and the dead. Another idea about the Dybbuk box tells a very different story. It says the box was not meant to hold a spirit at all, but sorrow. A few historians trace it back to Poland during the years of World War II. They say it was made by a woman named Havela, a Jewish survivor who lost everything: her husband, her children, her parents, and her siblings. She fled the country alone, escaping a concentration camp and carrying only a few small things. Among them was the little wooden cabinet that would one day be called the Dybbuk box. According to her family, Havela never opened it again. She kept it hidden for the rest of her life, and before she died at 103, she told her granddaughter, "Never open it." Some believe she wasn't hiding a curse but her grief. The box became a prison for feelings too heavy to bear, a place to lock away guilt, fear, and pain that could never be spoken aloud. Stories later surfaced from relatives who claimed that in 1938, just before the war began, Havela joined a small group of women who met in secret. They were desperate to protect their families from what they felt was coming. Some records say they tried to summon spiritual strength through prayer and ritual, calling on a force to defend them. When the war broke out soon after, Havela believed something had gone terribly wrong. She thought she had helped unleash evil instead of stopping it. To her, the cabinet was a way to trap that darkness, or maybe to contain her guilt for surviving when so many others didn't. Historians who examined the box say its design looks like early 20th century European woodwork, the kind often made in small workshops near Warsaw. The carvings and materials match what would have been available in Poland before the war. Psychologists studying the story suggest something more personal. They say people who live through extreme trauma often turn to symbols or rituals to give shape to what they cannot explain. It is a way of surviving what feels unbearable. One theory, called residual energy, suggests that strong emotion can leave a trace behind, a kind of invisible weight in an object or a place. Some researchers link this idea to Havela's loss, saying the box could hold the emotional echo of her grief. In that view, the strange feelings people later described around it are not necessarily supernatural, but human reactions to an object soaked in tragedy. Another theory takes a very different path. It suggests that Kevin Mannis, the man who first sold the box, wasn't trying to trick anyone. Instead, it says he acted as an unconscious medium, a person unknowingly guided by forces larger than himself. To occult thinkers, this isn't about lies or hoaxes. It's about creation through emotion, a kind of spiritual feedback loop. The idea comes from the concept of an egregore, sometimes called a thought form. In mystical traditions, an egregore begins as a simple idea, but grows stronger as more people believe in it. It becomes real in the sense that it starts to influence the world, even though it was born entirely from human thought. That's the framework people use when they talk about the Dybbuk Box, not as a haunted object, but as a story that came to life. It's believed that Kevin Mannis's story about the Dybbuk Box began as a creative piece, rather than a historical account. Yet for many, this only adds another layer to the mystery. They believe that the emotions and symbolism he poured into the story may have given the object a kind of energy of its own. Mannis wrote the eBay description on Yom Kippur, a day centered on reflection, guilt, and forgiveness. Some researchers suggest that deep emotional states like this can leave an imprint on objects, a process sometimes called psychic imprinting. In that view, Mannis didn't summon anything. He simply captured the energy already tied to his own thoughts and experiences. This is where the Dybbuk Box becomes more than an object. It becomes a mirror of human belief. Mannis may have carved its symbols, added its contents, and written the words that first gave it life. But according to this theory, the power came through him, not from him. Once the story reached the public, people began to project their own fears onto it. Each new owner's anxiety, illness, and nightmare fed the egregore further, layering more energy onto the myth. The box evolved with every retelling, like a snowball rolling downhill, gathering more power simply because people kept believing in it. Occult researchers point to this as proof that the Dybbuk Box created itself. The moment Mannis put it out into the world, it began to act independently. It shaped how others behaved, what they felt, and even what they saw. Jason Haxton, one of the later owners, once said that Mannis had unintentionally cursed the cabinet through the act of writing about it. Mannis denied ever placing a spell on it, but the strange events that followed made the theory harder to dismiss. One final idea about the Dybbuk Box comes from the world of modern fringe science. This theory says the box isn't haunted at all, it's charged. The claim is that it holds emotional energy trapped through something called quantum resonance. In this view, there are no ghosts, no curses, just physics stretched beyond what we can fully understand. Researchers who support this idea point to work once done at Princeton University's PIEAR lab, a real project that studied how human consciousness might affect physical systems. The lab ran experiments for nearly 30 years, testing whether thoughts could shift the behavior of small random machines. Some results showed small but unusual changes, and that became the spark for many later claims about mind-matter connections. Paranormal physicists took those findings and applied them to haunted objects like the Dybbuk Box. They believe every strong emotion, like fear, grief, or rage, leaves a mark on the world around it. Over time, they say, the energy doesn't disappear. It clings to things, especially objects linked to tragedy. In this case, the theory goes, the cabinet became a kind of emotional battery. Each person who owned it poured their own fear into it, and that charge kept building. Supporters describe this as consciousness imprinting. They say our thoughts and feelings might influence matter at a microscopic level, the same way observation can change particles in quantum experiments. If true, then the Dybbuk Box isn't holding a spirit, but the residue of human emotion layered over decades. Every nightmare, every panic attack, and every stroke of bad luck would be another signal added to the field around it. Some even use words from particle physics to explain what's happening. They talk about quantum connectedness, where everything in the universe is tied together, and about energy fields reacting to human intent. According to these theorists, when someone touches the box or even looks at it, their own energy interacts with the field already inside, like sound waves, vibrating in sync. The stronger the emotion, the louder the echo. So if that theory sounds strange, it's worth remembering this isn't the first time people have said an object could hold something unseen. All over the world, people have passed down tales about things that seem to hold their own kind of energy. Some of these stories are older than written history, and others come straight from modern files, church records, and police reports. One of the best-known haunted objects is the Annabelle doll. Most know it from the horror films, but the real story began in the early 1970s. The doll wasn't porcelain, but a simple Raggedy Ann toy owned by two nurses in Connecticut. They said it moved on its own and left small handwritten notes on parchment paper, even though they didn't own any. The messages were childlike and often read, "Help me." After hearing strange knocks, the nurses called a priest named Father Jason Bradford. He contacted two other people, who took the doll and sealed it in a wooden case marked with a warning not to open it. The Warrens Museum in Monroe, Connecticut, kept the records. Father Bradford blessed the doll before leaving, but hours later he was in a serious car crash. He later said something pushed his hands off the wheel. The church listed it as a case of object possession, and visitors still report feeling faint or heavy when standing near the display. Another story comes from Italy, the Bassano vase. It dates back to the 15th century and was said to be a wedding gift for a young bride in Napoli. The night before her wedding, she was found dead, still holding the vase. Witnesses claimed her last words were a warning: "It will bring death." The vase was passed down through generations, and each new owner reportedly died soon after receiving it. Records show at least 4 deaths in the same family, each listed as unexpected. The vase disappeared for centuries before reappearing in the 1980s with a note inside that read, "Beware, this vase brings death." Police in Torino confirmed it was surrendered by a frightened owner and sealed inside a lead container, where it remains hidden to this day. Stories like these show that the Dybbuk Box isn't alone. The Annabelle doll and the Bassano vase are just 2 examples of ordinary objects said to carry something far beyond explanation. In both cases, people who came in contact with them described strange events, sudden illness, and even near-death experiences. Tests and investigations found nothing, yet those who handled the objects swore something unseen was attached to them. But not everyone believes in the supernatural side of the story. Some think there's a much simpler reason behind all of it. Some experts believe the Dybbuk Box's strange power doesn't come from spirits or curses at all. They say it comes from something much closer to home, the human mind. According to psychologists, belief alone can shape what we feel, what we see, and even how our bodies react. This idea comes from a field of research called expectancy theory, which looks at how our expectations can change our physical state. When a person truly believes they're in danger, their body responds as if that danger is real. Heart rate goes up, skin temperature drops, and adrenaline floods the system. So if someone stands in front of a box that's said to be cursed, their body can react with real panic, even if nothing supernatural is happening. The nocebo effect is a big part of that. It's basically the evil twin of the placebo effect. The placebo effect can make someone feel better just because they believe they've been treated. The nocebo effect does the opposite. It makes people feel worse when they expect harm. Dr. Fabrizio Benedetti, a neuroscientist from the University of Turin, has spent decades studying this link. His research shows that the brain can trigger real symptoms like nausea, dizziness, or pain simply from fear or negative suggestion. He once described it as belief turning into biology. Dr. Richard Wiseman, a psychologist at the University of Hertfordshire, has also studied this kind of belief effect for years. He once tested how people reacted inside so-called haunted buildings. Before entering, one group was told the site was cursed, while another group was told it was under renovation. The first group later described cold spots, heavy feelings, and sounds of movement, even though sensors recorded no change in temperature or sound. Wiseman concluded that people's expectations were shaping their experiences far more than the environment itself. Psychologists say this might explain why the Dybbuk Box causes such different reactions from one person to another. One person might see an old wine cabinet, while another feels their chest tighten or senses a dark presence. It's not imagination in the childish sense. It's the brain responding to belief. When fear mixes with suggestion, the body treats it as truth. So while psychologists point to belief and fear, others decided to dig into the story itself, and what they found was surprising. When researchers began to look closely at the Dybbuk Box story, they started finding cracks in the version the world knew. The strange part wasn't just what they discovered, But how much of it had been hiding in plain sight? At first, the story seemed airtight, a haunted cabinet linked to a Holocaust survivor, filled with hair, coins, and symbols of protection. But digital traces told a different story. Investigators went through old versions of Kevin Mannis's eBay listings using cached pages and archived screenshots. One of those researchers, Kenny Biddle, known for his work in skeptical investigation, compared each version line by line. He noticed that phrases, dates, and even the emotional tone kept changing. In some versions, the granddaughter's warning appeared clearly: never open it. In others, that detail was missing altogether. The earliest draft, preserved in an internet archive, read more like a piece of dark creative writing than a first-hand account. There were long descriptive sentences, symbolic language, and even a few metaphors that made it sound like a ghost story rather than a real report. That discovery led others to question how the Dybbuk Box legend had formed. The first owner, Kevin Mannis, was known locally in Portland as a creative writer and performance artist. He owned a small antique shop and wrote spoken word poetry that often mixed themes of religion, guilt, and redemption. People who knew him described him as imaginative and intense, someone who could turn a simple object into a story. So when skeptics traced his background, they began to wonder if the Dybbuk Box was never meant to be taken as literal truth, but as a kind of art project that accidentally escaped into the real world. In the end, the Dybbuk Box may be scientifically ordinary, yet psychologically extraordinary. Maybe its power has never been in the wood or the metal at all, but in the story that surrounds it.